Okay, let's dive in. We're looking at a really intense, um, sometimes quite unexpected federal trial here. The U.S. versus Sean Diddy Combs.
Yeah, the courtroom's been, well, it's been under a serious spotlight. And the last couple of days, we're focusing on days 23 and 24, seem particularly packed.
That's exactly it. So welcome, everyone. We're doing a deep dive into what happened in court on those specific days. We've been combing through the source material.
Things like the actual transcripts, witness testimony details, evidence lists, the legal arguments back and forth.
Right. To pull out the really crucial stuff for you, our goal is to kind of unpack those key moments.
Help you understand what the prosecution's trying to build, how the defense is pushing back, without getting totally lost in every single legal filing.
Exactly. Now, we absolutely have to state this up front. This is an ongoing federal case. Everyone mentioned is presumed innocent unless until proven otherwise in court.
hmm And the content is very sensitive. It involves serious allegations.
Yes. Discussions about illegal substances, coercion, allegations of SA. If that kind of content is difficult for you, this deep dive might not be the best fit.
We'll also be using some alternative words for certain things based on the source material's instructions, just to navigate that sensitivity carefully. Things like pew pew or G instead of the actual term for weapons, or SA for certain alleged acts.
Right? It's crucial to acknowledge how serious these topics are. The source material gives us a window, but it's into some difficult subjects presented in court.
Agreed. So, day 23, where should we start? It sounds like it was pretty intense from the get-go.
It really was. I think one of the biggest things that jumped out from the source was the juror situation, juror number 6.
Yeah, that was significant. The judge formally dismissed him.
Why? What was the official reason?
It came down to inconsistencies in his residency claims. The judge felt these raised, serious questions about his honesty. Like, was he being upfront to get onto the jury? That was the concern.
Okay, wow. That's big. And did that become a major point later?
Oh, definitely. It spilled right into day 24. But before we get there, day 23 also had other legal battles.
Like evidence disputes.
Exactly. The defense tried hard to keep out some text messages. Something about a mysterious device,
Mm.
but the court ruled against them. So the texts weren't covered by attorney-client privilege, so they were fair game for the prosecution.
Gotcha. And wasn't there also something about another witness? Brianna Bongolan.
Right. The defense made a motion about her testimony. They claimed she lied about injuries supposedly happening on the same day back in 2016. They wanted the judge to tell the jury she'd committed perjury.
Did that happen?
No. We find out on day 24 that the judge denied that motion, but it shows the defense actively challenging witness credibility.
Okay, so after those legal points, the prosecution started presenting more of its case, like evidence from the investigation.
Yeah, they called federal agent Andre Leon. He testified about that raid on Mr. Combs's LA mansion back in March 2024.
What kind of details came out there? What was the focus?
Well, Agent Leon described what they found. The prosecution clearly wanted to link the items to the alleged activities. The source mentions things like a lot of Astrolite bottles, baby oil.
Things often associated with parties, perhaps?
Potentially, yeah. Also a safe with Mr. Combs's passport, substances identified as Molly and ketamine, lingerie, and then several pew or G.
Right, the alternative term for firearms.
Correct. And crucially, the agent testified one of them had its serial number filed off, and they found armor-piercing ammunition.
Okay, those details sound like things the prosecution would definitely highlight. Filed off serial number, specific ammo.
Exactly. Suggests attempts to obscure ownership or potential illegal intent is likely the argument.
After the agent, who was next?
Jonathan Perez. He's a former assistant to Mr. Combs, and he testified under an immunity deal.
Immunity, meaning he couldn't be charged based on what he said on the stand.
Correct. It's meant to encourage truthful testimony. And according to the source, his testimony seemed to align with some of the allegations from Justo.
In what way? What did he confirm?
He testified about setting up these events called Wild King Nights, described the atmosphere, red lights, adult toys, illegal substances being present.
Okay.
He also said he was asked to bring cash to Jane Doe after an alleged violent fight she had with Mr. Combs.
Did he mention anything else specific?
Yes, a pretty significant point. He testified he found an SCX video, that's the term the source uses for sensitive video content involving Jane Doe on an iPad.
And he told people about it.
He said he told Mr. Combs and his chief of staff, Christina Courtroom, and then the court actually played an audio recording. It was apparently Courtroom discussing how to handle that video discovery.
Wow. Okay, so the prosecution's likely using that to show awareness, maybe even damage control?
That would seem to be the implication they're aiming for. Perez also admitted buying illegal substances for Mr. Combs. He mentioned Coyena, Xanax, and ecstasy specifically.
But he didn't witness violence himself.
According to his testimony, no. He didn't see physical violence, but he did say he helped facilitate activities that Wayne Doe described as coercive. So, sort of involved in setting the stage, even if not witnessing the main alleged acts.
How did the defense respond during cross-examination? What was their strategy with Perez?
They tried to paint a different picture, particularly regarding Jane Doe's involvement. The source says they aimed to portray her as potentially jealous rather than a victim in some contexts.
How'd they do that?
Well, Mr. Combs' attorney, Brian Steele, specifically asked Perez if Jane Doe seemed like a willing participant in those Wild King nights.
And Perez's answer?
He reportedly said yes. So the defense is planting that seed of doubt, suggesting consent or perhaps different motivations behind her later statements.
Interesting. And wasn't there a celebrity sighting amidst all this?
Yeah. Kanye West showed up, unexpectedly, dressed all in white, apparently there to support Mr. Combs, caused a bit of a stir, stayed about 40 minutes, then left. Just a sort of side drama.
Okay, so day 23 ends with that juror number 6 dismissal being finalized.
Right. Permanently dismissed. And the source highlights the controversy around it, concerns about jury diversity, since he was one of only 2 black men on the panel. That really set the stage for day 24.
Which brings us right there. Day 24 starts, and it sounds like the jury issue was still the main event.
Absolutely. Judge Subramanian kicked things off addressing it. First, he formally denied that defense motion about Brianna Bongolan allegedly lying, said no specific instruction on perjury for the jury.
Okay.
Then, back to juror number 6, the judge basically doubled down on his reasons.
Reiterated the concerns about honesty.
Yes. He emphasized, according to the source, his serious concerns, that the juror was shading the answers to be on the jury. Said the shifting answers just raised too many credibility questions. He felt questioning him further would be inappropriate, maybe even taint the rest of the jury.
But the defense wasn't having it. They fought back hard.
They did. They submitted a formal letter to the judge laying out their arguments. They said, look, he didn't lie, the inconsistencies were minor, maybe just confusion from the questioning itself. They argued strongly that losing him hurt Mr. Combs' right to a fair trial.
And they brought up the race aspect again.
Very explicitly. They cited legal precedent, a 2D circuit case, and argued that in a case like this, serious allegations against a powerful black man having racial diversity on the jury was absolutely critical for fairness. Replacing a black juror with a white alternate, they argued, was problematic.
Did they go further, suggesting bias?
Yes, they voiced suspicion that the government targeted this juror specifically because he was black. They pointed to the jury selection process, noting the prosecution used, I think, 7 out of 9 challenges to remove black potential jurors. They framed it as a potential pattern of racial bias.
So what were they asking for? Put him back on the jury?
Essentially, yes. Reinstate him. Or, if the dismissal stood, declare a mistrial because, in their view, Mr. Combs couldn't get a fair trial without him.
Heavy arguments. How did the judge rule?
He acknowledged the seriousness of their concerns, said he took them seriously, but he stood by his decision. Further questioning was inappropriate. And critically, he rejected the idea of making the decision based on the juror's race, calling that inappropriate itself. So juror number 6 was officially excused, replaced by alternate number 1.
And the allegation of prosecutorial bias.
The judge rejected that allegation, too, found no misconduct based on race by the prosecution in this instance.
Okay, so that chapter closed, but then another juror issue popped up.
Yeah, this was kind of wild. News apparently broke via TMZ, mentioned in the source that another juror received a strange text message on Friday.
A text message about the trial.
Asking if he was juror number 6.
Whoa, okay, that's not good.
Huge red flag. The judge was obviously concerned. Could this juror be discussing the case outside? That's a massive violation of instructions. The source said the judge planned to talk to that juror at the end of the day to figure out what was going on.
All right, so after all that jury drama, day 24 finally gets back to testimony.
Yes. The prosecution called Anaya Sandkar. She's a paralegal specialist with the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Okay, not a fact witness per se, but someone presenting information.
Exactly. Her role was to introduce and authenticate 2 summary charts. These charts compiled information from, hundreds of pages of documents, mostly texts and audio recordings.
Why do they use summary charts like this?
It's allowed under court rules, like Rule 1006, when you have just a massive amount of records. It's impractical to show the jury every single page. So she prepared these charts, verified they accurately reflected the underlying documents. Her job is just to present what the documents say in an organized way. Importantly, she can't give her opinion, can't draw conclusions for the jury, just present the data. It can sometimes be used instead of calling tons of witnesses just to introduce one text message each.
Makes sense. So what kind of communications did her charge highlight? What was the focus?
A lot seemed to center on Christina Coram, the chief of staff. Texts mentioning an escort, apparently with laughing emojis. Discussions about someone named Mr. Lopez seeing escort.
And that audio recording came up again.
Yes, the one from November 19th, 2023, played again. Coram's voice reportedly saying, "Two things were weird. The only person who knew was you. Someone found it in the iPad." The prosecution likely wants the jury to connect that back to the SCX video Perez mentioned finding.
What else involving Coram? Did it show coordination?
It seems so. Messages about Mr. Combs being at the Four Seasons, meeting Gatorade, chicken noodle soup, coordinating cash transfers, like one message saying, "Run $4,000 cash from Rock to the hotel," mentioning names like Dave Shirley, Faheim, Rock. Another message, "Heads up, he's about to do Wild Kings tonight." Also, messages coordinating flights specifically for Jane Doe, like setting up a flight for Jane, and messages about picking up cash for someone named Guido, with Jane Doe confirming.
There were also messages between Mr. Combs and Coram presented.
Yes, about Guido apparently not dropping off a package. And then an audio message from Mr. Combs telling Coram to take care of it, please. Again, the prosecution is likely showing this to argue staff were deeply involved in managing logistics, potentially sensitive ones.
What about messages directly from Jane Doe that were presented?
These were quite significant. Some mundane, like asking Coram for 15 bath towels, but others were more revealing, like Jane Doe stating, "He always brings me 5 to 10K. Messages about wanting people out of a presidential suite.
And messages showing her state of mind, distress.
Definitely. Messages from early November 2023, before the Cassie Ventura lawsuit went public, where Jane Doe apparently told Coram she didn't want any more hotel nights, saying, "I just can't."
And after the Ventura lawsuit.
Then, according to the testimony, Mr. Combs appeared to forward screenshots of texts from Jane Doe where she wrote she felt extremely exploited, heartbroken, and manipulated by you.
They also played audio calls between them from right after that lawsuit dropped.
Yes, November 19th, 2023. The source describes Jane Doe sounding distressed, saying the Ventura lawsuit described her own experience word for word. Mr. Combs' voice was described as hoarse, and he apparently talked about kinky shit we definitely enjoyed, said he needed her friendship, asked her to pray for him.
Later messages suggested ongoing issues, maybe threats.
That seems to be what the prosecution aimed to show. Messages from December 2023, found on Coram's phone, had Jane Doe saying things like, "I lost work opportunities, you broke me," and referencing a conversation. "You asked me what I needed to move on, and now you're upset." The implication is this was directed at Mr. Combs.
And then messages between Jane Doe and Coram, who was referred to as KK.
Right. In those, Jane Doe reportedly wrote, "He said he would send the S-tapes to my baby daddy. I'm traumatized. He asked me who I'm seeing over and over again. He'll send the S-tapes to the father of my child on them. I'm DRUGGED. I'm beyond hurt by him."
Just to clarify again, S-tapes, meaning sensitive videos, and DRUGGED spelled out suggests being under the influence.
Exactly. Coram's response shown in court was reportedly just, "I haven't spoken to him." Later, Jane Doe texted Coram, "You have effed up everything you win." The prosecution presents these to argue coercion, control, and threats continued.
Were there messages involving Cassie Ventura shown too?
Yes, communications between Cassie Ventura and Coram, KK, going back further to 2017 and 2018. In one from 2017, Cassie asked something like, "What the essay cars?" And Coram replied, "Are you okay? No one deserves to be dragged by their hair."
Implying knowledge of an incident.
That's likely the inference the prosecution wants the jury to make. In 2018, Cassie texted Coram, "I just can't anymore," and Coram offered support, advising her, "Don't derail because it's not worth it." Showing a pattern of alleged issues over time involving different women, but the same staff member, is probably the goal here.
Any other media from Coram's device?
Some videos were mentioned, played in court, described as having a woman's voice saying, like $1,000, a photo of a long nail, and messages from Coram about chilling at his house, being out to shop like King Knight mode or Gucci bag mode, painting a picture of the lifestyle activities.
Sandkar also testified about attempts to contact Mia, another former assistant with allegations.
Yes. This involved messages from February 2024. It showed Mr. Combs and a security staffer, Damon Butler, aka Drock, trying to reach Mia over about a week.
And this was after the Cassie Ventura lawsuit and other allegations had surfaced.
Right, nearly a week after. The timing is likely something the prosecution flagged.
What was the nature of the contact attempts?
Drock sent messages like, "Love you, man, if you need a friend, I'm here," offering a gift, saying Mr. Combs didn't want anything from her. Then Mr. Combs himself messaged Mia on Feb 7th, saying something like, "Hey, I don't want to be blowing up your phone. Just need my memory jogged on some things. You are my right hand for years, and I just want to speak to you to remember who was even around me."
Need my memory jogged.
Yeah. Sandcar confirmed there were no records of Mr. Combs calling Mia after that message. The prosecution might argue this shows an attempt to influence a potential witness or gauge what she might say, given the public allegations.
How did the defense counter Sandcar's testimony during cross-examination?
Attorney Tina Garagos tried to poke holes in the narrative. She focused on specific messages or time periods to suggest maybe staff weren't always involved in procuring substances or coordinating these freak-offs.
For example,
Highlighting times when Quorum's messages didn't seem relevant, or reading messages not included in the prosecution's summary chart, like Jane Doe asking to be dropped off somewhere, Quorum mentioning dealing directly with PD, not him, or Jane Doe sounding excited to surprise him. Also a message from Jane Doe later saying, "I'm not doing any more hard partying," trying to show complexity, maybe inconsistency, or different interpretations.
okay, so after Sandcar, there was another summary witness.
Yes, Special Agent Delisha Pinland. Similar role, different focus. She testified about charts summarizing meetings and travel based on records like flight invoices, hotel bills, messages.
Same limitations, no opinions, just the data.
Exactly. Rule 1006 summary witness. Cannot infer, assume, or tell the jury what it means. Just present what the documents allegedly show.
What specific events did her testimony cover?
She presented records linked to alleged specific events. One was a December 2009 meeting at the London Hotel in NYC. Records supposedly showed Mr. Combs, Cassie Ventura, and an escort named Jules Theodore were involved.
What kind of records?
Flight and hotel payments for that weekend, reportedly paid with Mr. Combs' Amex card. Messages like Jules saying, "I'm available Friday through Sunday," and Mr. Combs replying, "Friday at 4, showing coordination and payment, allegedly.
Other events?
Events in October 2012, a travel invoice for Cassie Ventura flying LA to NYC sent to Bad Boy Entertainment. Messages between Combs and Ventura like, "You ready for the night?" Texts from Ventura apparently setting up meetings with two men giving hotel info. Hotel bills paid in cash or Amex under other names. And videos from October 14 found on Ventura's device were shown to the jury.
Then there was that January 2013 event, the Christmas freak-off.
Right. Pinland presented records, the prosecution says, detail setting this up with 4 men. A text from Combs to Ventura, "Want to celebrate Christmas and have a freak-off tomorrow or Friday." Then text from Ventura apparently arranging it with an escort service and individuals setting up staggered arrival times.
Any other messages related to that?
A message from one alleged participant, Santiago, mentioning wanting to do another voyeur encounter. Also messages involving Cassandra Ventura and someone called NY Punish, Sheree Hayes, about the cost mentioned in a video.
More messages between Combs and Ventura, too.
Yes. Combs asking, "You horny, would you want to have a freak out?" Ventura asking about calling Jules and needing hotel info. Combs saying, "I'm a bit more sexually excited than last time, dress casually and bring baby oil." Again, showing alleged planning and specific requests.
Seems like a clear pattern the prosecution is trying to establish through these records.
That's definitely the goal. Using Pinland and Sandcar to lay out the paper trail, the money, the travel, the messages connecting dates, people, and locations to argue these were planned, coordinated events.
Did the defense object to Pinland's testimony?
Oh, yeah. Mr. Shapiro, another defense lawyer, objected strongly. He argued she was going beyond just summarizing. Said she had no personal knowledge and was essentially connecting dots for the jury, asking them to interpret flight records and hotel bills in a certain way, which he felt was inappropriate for a summary witness.
How did the prosecution respond?
Mr. Combs, for the prosecution, pushed back, argued they were just showing Combs and Jules Theodore were in the same place at the same time via the records. And he kind of threatened that if the judge sustained the objection, they'd just have Agent Pinland read every single text message out loud to prove the volume and necessity of the summary.
Okay. So stepping back, how does all this detailed testimony from Sandcar and Pinland fit into the prosecution's overall strategy?
It's fundamental to their RICO case.
Right. RICO, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Explain that connection again.
So to win on RICO, the government has to prove Mr. Combs operated or was part of an enterprise, an organized group that repeatedly committed specific crimes over a period of time for personal or financial gain.
So these freak-offs, wild nights, the alleged use of escorts, the SA allegations, they aren't just individual potential crimes.
Exactly. The prosecution is framing them as part of the pattern of the enterprise's alleged criminal activity. They're arguing these events were calculated, involved recruitment, transport, payment, sometimes coercion or manipulation, all pointing towards an organized, ongoing operation, not just isolated incidents.
And the evidence presented by Sankar and Pinlan provides the backbone.
That's the idea. The paper trail payments, flights, hotels, plus the communications showing coordination, alleged staff involvement in arranging things or covering them up. That's all used to argue this was an enterprise, a structured operation.
And the accounts of Cassie Ventura and Jane Doe are key examples within that alleged pattern.
Precisely. Their stories, especially the alleged similarities in how they were treated or controlled, are used to argue this was systemic, not accidental. It helps the prosecution argue this was an ongoing criminal operation fitting the ICO definition. The DOJ paralegals and agents are there to provide the documented proof, the when, where, who, and how much, linking it all together.
Got it. Were there any other smaller points mentioned in the source material from these days?
A couple of things. Brendan Paul's name came up briefly. He's been described as an alleged illegal substance runner. The source just noted he got off somehow. Details unclear, but the judge mentioned discussing him.
And the defense plans to call witnesses soon.
Looks like it. The source mentioned they might call 3 people on Friday, Vasha Wilson, Stephen Lynn, and a paralegal, so we'll start hearing their case presentation.
Anything else?
Just a mention of Dalbert issues regarding a defense expert at Dr. Hughes. Dalbert hearings are about whether expert testimony meets scientific reliability standards to even be presented to the jury. So, some legal wrangling over expert evidence, too.
Okay, so wrapping up our look at days 23 and 24, what are the big takeaways for you, looking at the source material?
Well, you really see the legal fight playing out on multiple fronts. Huge battles over the jury itself, the dismissal, the defense's serious allegations of bias, the replacement. That's critical context. And then you have this incredibly detailed presentation from the prosecution through witnesses like Sankar and Pinland, laying out mountains of communications and financial records.
Yeah, trying to build that picture of coordination, of staff involvement, of alleged control and planning.
Exactly. Seeing those specific messages, the flight details, the cash transfer instructions, it gives you a much clearer view of how the prosecution is trying to construct their ICOA case. They're arguing this wasn't random, it was an operation. It moves you past just headlines to the actual evidence being argued over in court.
It definitely does. And thinking about all this, the volume of records, the testimony from people like Perez, the harrowing messages attributed to Jane Doe and Cassie Ventura, contrasted with the defense challenging motivations and interpretations.
It really makes you wonder how the jury processes it all. How do they weigh, seemingly concrete records like flight itineraries against testimony about willingness or jealousy? How do they parse coercion versus consent from text messages?
Right. And looking at the prosecution's RICO theory based on this source material, what elements of alleged coordination versus maybe just individual bad choices might stand out most to jurors? Is the evidence strong enough to convince them of an entire criminal enterprise?
Those are exactly the questions hanging in the air. It's one thing to show concerning events happened. It's another to prove they were all part of a single ongoing racketeering operation under the law. That's the high bar the prosecution has to clear, and what the defense is fighting against every step of the way.